Welcome back to yet another episode of the Sports Nerds. I am Dawson Livingston, joined by, as always, Braden Bankin. Braden, how are we doing?
Doing all right. Just soaking up this playoff football while we got it. Uh, lot more lopsided scores than I saw coming, but I mean, it still was entertaining to watch. Looking forward to next week as well.
Yeah, last week when we previewed, I made the argument that it was probably the greatest 4 week stretch or 4 day stretch in football history. Because last week, if you remember, there was the playoff game in college football on that Thursday night. There was the playoff game on Friday night. We
Hmm.
had more wild card games on Saturday, and we had wild card games Sunday, and even there was one on Monday. Overall, if you were a football fan this last week, you enjoyed it thoroughly, and we kind of want to start off by recapping some of those games. Obviously, wild card round, not a whole lot to talk about. Not very many games were close except for the Sunday night game, but we'll get into that later. First game to start off this playoffs was the Chargers and the Texans. Uh, Houston wins this one by a score of 32-12. Houston kind of started off slow, but that defense really stepped up, forced Justin Herbert to throw 4 interceptions and have below 50% completion percentage. Braden, do you think the Texans are a real threat in this playoff run, or did you think it was just the Chargers' inability on offense?
I mean, it's hard to tell. I was not exactly convinced by the Texans' regular season. I thought C.J. Stroud looked questionable at times, but man, if the Texans can look through the rest of this playoffs how they did against the Chargers, albeit it's the Chargers in the playoffs, we all know how
It's
that
true.
generally ends up. But
True.
I think I saw Herbert threw more picks in this game than he had the entirety of the calendar year of 2024. So, like
We got to
that's
start push. We got to start an agenda with Herbert in the playoffs. It's
yeah,
been
Emmanuel
two.
Acho might have been right. He might be a social media quarterback.
It's been two playoff games where he's played awesome in one half, and then the other three halves of football, he's just been horrid. Like, I'm referring to obviously the Chargers Jacksonville game from 2 years ago at this point, where the Chargers were up 27-0, ended up losing that game. And then obviously the one that happened this past Saturday, where it was kind of a close game in the first half, but after that fumble by CJ Stroud, the Texans really just blew the game out of the water. Like I said, 4 interceptions, one of them being a pick six. Stroud didn't have necessarily the greatest game, but didn't play poor either. He had 22 for 33 on attempts, 282 yards, one touchdown, one pick, and a QBR of 64.9, which is above average. I mean, that's what CJ's been all year. He's had a sophomore slump, excuse me, from his year last year, but still played really well in that second half of the playoffs. They unfortunately get the matchup this week, which we'll get into later, of going on the road to Arrowhead Stadium to play the Chiefs. But hey, the Texans, when it comes to playing a Saturday playoff game at 4:30, you can count on the Texans winning that game because that is it. Isn't that the stat? They've only played it Saturdays at 4:30 or
I think
something like
for the
that,
last like 10 or 11 years, it's always been Saturday at 4:30. And the
which is
Chiefs, I believe, their two losses this year were between the times of 4:30 and 5 o'clock kickoff. So be
one
warned.
loss. The Week 18 does not count.
Listen,
I
you
ref-
still lost.
okay.
You still lost, and it was at that time frame.
You might be onto
Listen,
something, but
I'm just showing you the stats. You can interpret it however you
that's
want.
that's true. That's true. But yeah, Texas came out with a dominating win and move on to the next round of the playoffs. The next game, that Saturday night, was Ravens and Steelers. Uh, this one wasn't even really close either. Baltimore ends up winning this one 28-14. Ravens jumped out to an early 21 to nothing lead, and from there on out, it was just Baltimore all the way. Derrick Henry reminding us why he's probably the greatest running back of this generation. I don't think that's an argument over the last 10 years. I think Derrick Henry has to be up there. If you want to go the generation before, you could argue guys like Adrian Peterson, but I think when you talk about mid 2010s to now, Derrick Henry is by far and away this generation's best running back, and he proved it. He had 26 carries, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns. What's there not to like about the Ravens? I want to ask you a question. Do you think that the Ravens played this well because they're just this good of a team, or do you think it was just because the Steelers are going to steal and they're just going to? We've seen the last 5 weeks of the regular season. We know that they haven't been playing well. But what do you think it is? You think the Ravens won this game more, or do you think Pittsburgh just lost it in the end?
I think it's both. I mean, you would like to see Lamar do a little bit more passing, but when Derrick Henry can just get you 10 yards a run, who cares? I mean,
Right.
their leading receiver was Isaiah Likely with 3 catches for 53 yards. I think Zay Flowers ended up going down this game, or maybe it was week 18. I'm not entirely sure.
It
But
was week
he's
18, and he's
okay. Well,
questionable to even play this week against the Bills. But yeah,
yeah. Hopefully they can get him back. Obviously, he made the Pro Bowl like we talked about last episode. Hopefully, yeah, that should help out a little bit in the passing game. But yeah, the Steelers, the end of the year, they looked rough, and then got another great team got beat. We'll see what happens with them next year. They got a lot of question marks that they're gonna have to figure out answers for.
right. They're the last few years, it's kind of been a revolving door at quarterback for the Steelers. Obviously, once Big Ben retired, drafted a guy, Kenny Pickett, the hometown kid from Pitt. That didn't work out too well. They bring in a guy like Russell Wilson, who didn't play poorly, but I think when you're put in the Steelers offense, I don't think you're made for success. Justin Fields had some good moments, he had some bad moments for them. But I think the Steelers, they got to figure out their answer at quarterback. But I feel like we've also been saying that the last 3 or 4 years for them. So maybe it'll change, maybe it won't. But yeah, Pittsburgh season ends to Baltimore by the score of 28-14. And yeah, we'll see where they end up going in free agency, maybe the draft for a quarterback, but who knows? It's really early to tell. Next game, Buffalo and Denver. You know, as someone who thought this would be a closer game, at once Denver was up 7-0, I'm like, oh man, Buffalo's on upset alert. And then Buffalo was like, nope. They end up scoring 31 points in a row and a rout of 31-7 against Denver. Josh Allen looked really, really good this game, and Buffalo was even able to run the ball effectively. They had 210 yards on the ground. I mean, just an overall great game for the Bills. Do you think Buffalo is the second best team in the AFC? Where do you have them at with the remaining four teams in the playoffs right now?
I I don't know, man. I feel like them and the Ravens are just like the same. They're the same quality team to me. But I think just based off of what we've seen in the history of the playoffs, I feel like you kind of have to give the edge to the Bills right now. Just, just yeah. I don't know. Really, I can't really give you an answer because they're like the same. I wouldn't want to see either of these teams,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, they both have to play each other.
Yeah, and that game this coming Sunday will be probably one of the better divisional games I think we've ever had, at least in recent memory. So that will be a super fun one to watch. But yeah, Bills just with a very dominating win again, 31-7 against a Denver team that shocked a lot of people. I know when me and Brock made preseason predictions back in August, I didn't have Denver anywhere near the playoffs, so I'll give them their props for making it going 9-8 or 10-7, excuse me, on the year. But ultimately, when you play a team like Buffalo and a quarterback like Josh Allen, you can't be too mad with the result of getting bounced in the first round. But hey, Denver's got a bright future. They got a lot of young good players in Bo Nix, Pat Surtain. So we'll see where they end up going from here. Next game on the schedule was the Packers and Eagles. This one again wasn't really a close one at all. I mean, Philly jumped out to an early 10-0 lead. Jalen Hurts didn't lose them the game, but didn't have a great game. Jordan Love, though, that's going to be the really big topic that I want to talk about. Jordan Love ends up going 20 for 33, 212 yards, 3 interceptions, and it just seemed like Green Bay could never get it going on offense. Granted, they had a lot of injuries that happened during the game. I think there was 4 or 5 players that had to leave the game for Green Bay. So injuries played a part in it, but man, it just looked like Green Bay was overwhelmed by that Philly defense, which is another thing we could talk about. The remarkable turnaround for Philly's defense from a year ago, where it seemed like their defense was losing them games, to now where it's like they're single-handedly winning games for the Eagles. Where do you sit at right now with the Eagles? Do you think they can potentially win this week and go into Detroit, or do you think The offense is still going to hold you back on picking them to go far.
I again, I could see this going either way. Like I said before in my playoff bracket, I feel like if there's a team that's going to be able to stop Saquon, the Lions have been really good against the run. And it seems like that's kind of all they're really able to do right now is run the ball. You'd like to see Jalen Hurts be able to throw it out, but that's never really been his game. So we'll see how that goes. I think that's going to be another really good game. But yeah, going back to Jordan Love, man, what happened? Three picks, no touchdowns against the Eagles defense. I mean, it like you said, it got a lot better, but you still nothing. No touchdowns. Your only touchdown of the game was Josh Jacobs. I mean, man,
Yeah.
prayers up to Romeo Dobbs. Hope he's doing okay. But
Yeah.
yeah, again, another team that I feel like a lot of guys had pretty high expectations. Maybe even in the call with me right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll
Not
another team that's going to be interesting to see what direction they go this offseason.
It's not good for the brand as someone who picked Green Bay to make the Super Bowl back in August. I thought Jordan Love would take that next step. Granted, he didn't play bad this year, but when it wasn't Toyotathon, Jordan Love was just not playing good football for them. So ultimately, Green Bay's season does end by the score of 22-10 against an Eagles team that will be facing the Los Angeles Rams in this next week of the divisional round. Uh, Next game was probably the only close game we had all wildcard weekend, but it was a good game. It was Commanders and Buccaneers. Commanders win this one by a score of 23-20. I mean, it was just a good football game on both sides. Not super high scoring, but Jaden Daniels was ultimately the catalyst of why Washington was able to win this game. Not only was their leading passer, obviously, but was their leading rusher on the ground. Daniels had 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, a QBR of 80, and then also added 36 yards on the ground. And it just looked like, I know he made that comment last week before the playoffs. He's like, you know what? It's just another game. It truly looked like for him that it was just another game. He was super comfortable back there. Tampa Bay wasn't really able to get him nervous or running around. They only had one sack on him the entire day, which super impressive for a Washington O-line that I think's been shaky all year. At some point, I think we have to start arguing, is Jaden Daniels like in that upper echelon of quarterbacks? I mean, he's having arguably the greatest rookie season ever. I think you could maybe him and Stroud last year. Where do you think the Commanders have any shot of going into Detroit this week and pulling off the upset?
No, I really don't think so. Like you said, Jane Daniels is putting on probably the best quarterback rookie season we've ever seen. But that Lions team just looks incredible from what we've seen. Absolutely put out the Vikings week 18 in a must-win game. We'll talk about the Vikings later, but I I've put too much stock in the Lions this year for me to say, yeah, the Commanders are going to go in and win it. No shade to the Commanders. I think they're a really good team as well, but no. Just no.
Yeah, and I think what's ultimately going to cost Washington in the end is just their defense. I don't trust that defense whatsoever. Granted, they've been playing better ball as of late, but they're going to have to play a team like Detroit, which is now getting Dave Montgomery back, already has Jameer Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta. Like, the list goes on for the weapons they have. I think it's just going to be too much in the end for Washington to overcome. On the flip side of this game, Tampa Bay, obviously the game kind of flipped when the fumble happened with Baker Mayfield and Jalen McMillan. Where are you at right now with Tampa Bay? Like in the whole Baker Mayfield, do you think Tampa Bay is kind of stuck where they're at, or do you think they can ultimately push for a Super Bowl in the next few years?
I I feel like you've kind of capped out what Baker can do. I love Baker. I shout out Brock. He's not here today. He'd be singing his praises as well. But there are limits to what a Baker Mayfield archetype quarterback can do, and we are seeing it. I don't think he's gonna end up being the guy to win him a Super Bowl. Yeah, that being said, I don't know if you can necessarily get rid of him because you can't
No.
find a quarterback on the market better than Baker Mayfield right now. But yeah, as far as taking the next step to be a Super Bowl contender again, I don't think that's happening.
And I just really want to quickly shout out Baker Mayfield for where his career was at just a few short years ago, getting cut by the Panthers midseason, getting picked up by the Rams, having that game-winning drive against the Raiders that really kind of just like sparked his career back. Like I think he was going to be out of the league, if not a backup, if uh if that game-winning drive didn't happen. So shout out to him. Obviously got to deal with Tampa last year. Was able to ball out. Baker's probably one of the last true gunslingers that we have, where it's like you're going to get a bunch of touchdowns. I think Baker had almost 40 touchdowns this year and almost 46 or 4,700 yards. But with that comes a lot of turnovers. I know he led the NFL in interceptions. I know he had a lot of fumbles too. I think there's a ceiling with the Baker Mayfield led team, but I do think Tampa Bay can potentially take that next step. For them, it's just going to be getting the better on defense. But shout out to the Buccaneers; they had a great season, and yeah, probably the only good playoff game we had was that one. So, kind of to recap, wild card weekend, Minnesota played the Rams. Rams win this one by a score 27-9. This game was originally supposed to be played in LA, obviously. Got moved to Glendale, Arizona in the Cardinal Stadium, and it just felt like from the opening kickoff, the Rams just owned this game. That first drive, marched down the field, 75 yards, scored that first touchdown. It kind of set the tone. I think the huge talking point of this game, though, isn't the Rams dominating win. It's Sam Darnold. I mean, where are you at right now with Sam Darnold? Do you think he's worthy of said contract extension in Minnesota? Or if you're the Vikings, do you just cut your ties with him and move on with a guy like McCarthy who's been sitting under his wing for a year?
Yeah, I think you kind of just have to go with JJ. Uh, I, you hate to make your decision on a guy after one playoff game, but I feel like we've kind of seen the last 2 weeks that he's not going to win you the big one.
No.
So, I yeah, the talking point on media this whole week has been Sam Darnold just lost himself about $60 million. And I'd have to agree. I think his tag probably just got knocked down a good 10 mil a year.
Yeah.
Um, and he's not getting in Minnesota. I don't think so.
Not if he were. I think there's a path where he stays in Minnesota, but he would have to take a significant discount with the fact that Minnesota already has McCarthy, like who, granted, is recovering from what is it, a torn Achilles or torn ACL. He had an injury,
Yeah.
a season-ending injury. Um, if he's willing
Which
to come
it
back,
was in the preseason, but yeah.
right? If he's able to come back from Minnesota, kind of just be that grace period for when McCarthy eventually gets healthy. Maybe sign him for 15, 20, maybe 25 million bucks for a year. I think that'd be smart by Minnesota, but I also totally get after seeing the last 2 weeks if you're the Vikings and saying we're just going to cut our ties. The big talking point is Sam Darnold got sacked 9 times for 82 yards.
Yeah.
I think that's the most yards lost via sacks in playoff history by one quarterback. I could be wrong on that. I
I,
thought
I wouldn't be surprised.
um just didn't have a good game. It just felt like he was holding on to the ball way too long, was trying to extend plays, trying to roll out, and that Rams defense was ferocious. Ultimately, the Rams even got a defensive touchdown. The scoop and score by, was it Byron Young who scored the touchdown, or was it Verse? I'm pulling it up. Jared Verse ended up scooping that fumble up for 57 yards. Man, as someone who's been a believer in the Rams and as someone who was selling his Minnesota stock after that Lions game, I'm glad that I'm sitting where I'm at. And for Brock, I think you and Brock both had Minnesota moving on in this one. Does that sound right?
I believe I did, yes.
We'll get to the brackets in a second to kind of recap where we're all sitting at. But yeah, the man. I think the Rams, it's going to be tough for them to win this next weekend. I think there's a very real shot that they go into Philadelphia and pull off the upset. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Might be a hot take, but I really like where the Rams are at. I really like Stafford and McVay. Um, Kind of
Yeah,
recapping. Oh, sorry.
my only other thing I wanted to say about that game is Vikings fans have been complaining the last week or so about how it's crap that they should be that they're the 5 seed. They want it to be like the NBA where it's just 1 through 7. It doesn't matter about divisions.
Which I hate.
Um,
I hate that in the NBA.
get wrecked, kid.
Yeah.
Win more games.
Yeah. No, because if they got rid of divisions in the NFL, it honestly, like, because do you even does the average NBA fan know that there are divisions?
No. Well, because they don't matter other than just you play them 4 times a year.
Right. Like, I know as a Cavs fan, the Central Division has the Cavs, the Bulls, the Bucks, the Pacers, and the Pistons. Like, I know that because me and you are diehard NBA fans. Like, we know that. But as the average fan who doesn't know anything about the NBA or very little, divisions don't matter to them. Whereas the NFL kind of, yes, there's some years where it's like, does so and so really deserve to be hosting a playoff game? I get that, but if you wanted to host that playoff game, go beat that team on the road then. And like you said, the Vikings were whining all week that they didn't get that home game. I don't think that really would have made a difference if I'm being totally honest. Because I think, I don't know if you watched that game, that fan base was majority Vikings fans. Like, there weren't that many Rams fans at that game. I think you could argue it was 60-40, but it felt like there was a lot of Vikings fans there. Because Vikings fans just travel well. So I don't even think that it would have mattered had the game been in Minnesota versus being in Arizona, which it was played. But yeah, Viking season ultimately ends 27-9. I kind of want to recap our playoff brackets, see where we're all sitting at right now. The only incorrect pick that I have is I picked the Chargers over the Texans, but again, Ravens beat the Steelers, Bills beat the Broncos, Commanders beat the Bucks, Rams beat the Vikings, and the Eagles beat the Packers. Braden's, do you want to talk about yours and where you're sitting at right now?
Yeah, I think I was pretty much the same as yours, except I had the Vikings winning, which I had them losing in the divisional anyways, so it's
Right.
not too bad. But yeah, I regret putting my stock in a Minnesota football team to win in the playoffs. That's on me.
And all three of us whiffed on the Texans Chargers game. We all had the Chargers advancing to the divisional round, and I will no. I've lost all hope in Justin Herbert having playoff success. So Texans fans, I'm sorry. I will not pick the Chargers. I will not do that mistake again if I have any say for it. But again, all of us are still sitting pretty good. Brock, on the other hand, who's not here to defend himself, so I kind of feel bad, is missing one of his NFC title picks. Buccaneers obviously go down to the Commanders. Brock's always been pretty bullish about Baker Mayfield and the Bucks, so I'll give him that. He was right 2 years ago when Baker first joined the Bucks. I didn't think they were going to be anything, so shout out to him for that prediction. But in the end, Tampa Bay ultimately falls. But yeah, we all still have our Super Bowl champion so far, so we'll see. Let me pull. In other news in the NFL, just because it's kind of been a pretty quiet week, there's been some head coaching interviews. I think the biggest storyline that I really want to touch on is this Dallas Cowboys head coaching job opening up. There's the rumors that Dion's going to be the head coach. I've seen Kellen Moore. I've seen they obviously didn't bring back Mike McCarthy. Where do you think Dallas is ultimately going to go for their head coach? Do you think they bring in a guy like Dion who's got a lot of power within the organization, or do you think they bring in an outsider that is unnamed as of right now?
I mean, like Dion's been in contact apparently with the Cowboys. Has either just talked to him. I don't know if they've had like an interview or anything yet. I it's kind of the same thing last year where you were kind of wondering like when Bill Belichick got fired, like is he gonna go interview with the Cowboys? I mean, obviously he didn't get that because he would want GM roles a little bit. Dion's not going to ask for that, but he's going to want to at least get. He's at least going to ask like, "Hey, can I get Like, can I get Shadur? Can I get Travis? Can I get somebody? And Jerry is just not the kind of GM that's going to give their coach that kind of leash to be able to go get the guys he wants. The Cowboys under Jerry Jones have been, all right, Jerry's going to give you your guys. You gotta deal out your cards in order to be able to win your games. And you win games, but you're not going to win like playoff games. And I don't think it's going to end well if the Cowboys decide to go that route, and I don't think they will. I like Kellen Moore. I think most likely that's going to be who's going to get that job. We'll see who all they interview as the process goes on, but I'd say if I had to pick a shot right now, it's going to be Kellen Moore.
One thing I want to note too with this job is because they didn't let McCarthy go until last Friday or Saturday, they were unable to interview any of the top um, coordinators. I'm talking Aaron Glenn, the Lions DC, who's assuredly going to get a head coaching job. Ben Johnson, who it's felt like the last 2 or 3 years has been talked about getting a head coaching job. They were unable to interview those guys, so kind of they're already behind the eight ball in that aspect. I think the odds as of now sit as Dion as the favorite to get this job, with Kellen Moore in second, Cliff Kingsbury, which I don't even think that's a remote possibility. I think Cliff's going to stay in Washington. If I had to take a guess, also be pretty funny, but I just don't think that one's going to happen. Other ones listed: Joe Brady, who's the Bills' offensive coordinator. That one could be interesting. Uh, Other coaches that are listed here, which I just think is crazy. Belichick is listed here. Steve Sarkisian, Jason Witten. There's like some crazy odds.
Jason Witten,
Jason Witten's a plus
dude.
850 to be the Cowboys' next head
All
coach.
right.
Granted, I think Jason Witten is coaching high school ball down in Texas. So you can't say he doesn't have any coaching experience, but
This is Jeff Saturday. Come on.
yeah, like if they end up going the Jason Witten route, oh man, that would honestly make that would be so funny. That would be talking points for me for the whole
I think
podcast
I
for
think Dallas
weeks.
Cowboys fans would march to Jerry Jones's house and drag him into a retirement home. That that would not be simply could not happen. There's no way.
I get bringing in guys that have familiarity within the Cowboys. Dion makes sense. He played for the Cowboys. Kellen Moore makes sense. Was the OC for the Cowboys. I get all that. Jason Witten though,
Jason Witten?
Jason
No.
Witten hasn't coached college football, whereas Dion has the last few years for Jackson State and obviously Colorado. And Kellen Moore has been a coordinator for what it feels like the last 6 or 7 years, and it's been a good one. And already has been the Dallas Cowboys OC. I don't know. I think it's just going to be a super big talking point for the next few weeks. It's just funny that some of these guys are even listed here. Again, the Jason Witten one, the Bill Belichick one, which I think Belichick's holding out for a head coaching job. I don't think like him to North Carolina's totally set in stone. I know he has a huge buyout clause, but I truly believe if Belichick called up Jerry Jones and said, "Hey, I will be the Cowboys' next head coach," I think Jerry Jones would buy him out from North
Oh, for
Carolina.
sure.
And oh man, that would be. Oh man, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I could take that with Belichick being the head coach of the Cowboys. That would be insufferable from Cowboys fans. I don't know if mentally I could do it. I don't know if you're the same way, but
Yeah, no. No.
I already feel weird talking about the Cowboys, but the Cowboys are just like, I hate saying this, but they're like the number one marquee team with the NFL. And they always will be probably because their fan base is huge. It spreads all around the country. Obviously, there's the meme where there's Lakers fans, Cowboys fans, and Yankees fans. Like those people out there do exist, like people that live in the '90s. But oh man, I can't wait to see who's going to be the head coach of the Cowboys because if it ends up being Jason Witten or Bill Belichick, that would be funny. But if it ends up being Dion, maybe this is the turning point that the Cowboys need uh, to look forward to in the next few years. Moving on, let's talk about these next few divisional games that are coming up. Uh, I think we have a great slate of games. Um, probably the best ones you could have asked for. I know the spreads say differently, but I think all of these are going to be entertaining games. First one this weekend is going to be Chiefs and Texans. Chiefs finally playing a meaningful game after 24 days of rest. Chiefs, I believe, are 8-point favorites. Yeah. Where do you think this game ends up going? Do you think Kansas City is just gonna?
Special guest.
Yes. You think Kansas City's just gonna run over the Texans, or do you think this can be a competitive game?
Yeah, I mean, like we saw, what was it, 2021 or two when they played and the Texans blew that big. Oh my God, can you not do this right now?
Special guest on the pod.
We'll get her opinion on the matter later. But um, yeah, I think there's a chance that this is close, mainly just because, I mean, every game with the Chiefs have been close this year.
Right.
But I do believe the Chiefs still take this one. Yeah.
The people don't need to hear my opinion. They already
Yeah,
they
we
know. They know. I do think it's going to be interesting. I think the huge storyline for this game for Kansas City is the play of the offensive line. They are finally getting a hopefully a healthy offensive line. It sounds like DJ Humphries is going to start at left tackle for them, who got hurt back in the Chargers game back at the beginning of December. He's had a full month off, which kicks Joe Tooney back into left guard. I'm curious to see how that's going to look in the first few drives. But yeah, if the Houston's able to get pressure, it's going to be a close one. But I think ultimately in the end, Kansas City wins this one by a comfortable margin. I'll say Kansas City wins by 10 plus. And I know they haven't been blowing teams out all year. I truly think they've been saving it for the playoffs. That's just my personal opinion.
This is a 4-point game written all over it. That's where I'll stand on it.
24-20. Book it. Next game, that also on the Saturday night, the other one seed in the NFC kicks off their playoff season with the Lions hosting the Commanders. This game, Vegas thinks it's going to be a 9.5-point spread. I get it. Detroit's been really good all season. I wouldn't roll over Washington like Vegas is thinking. I think this could be a close game because I think both defenses are kind of a wash. You could say Detroit has a better defense, but I just think this is ultimately going to be one of the higher scoring games we have all playoffs. I don't think Detroit's going to be able to slow down Daniels, but to be fair, I don't think Washington's going to be able to slow down the Detroit passing attack. Where do you sit at right now with this game? Do you think Washington's going to keep it close? I know I already asked you this earlier, or do you think Detroit's just going to win this one pretty handedly?
I don't think it's going to be a rollover, but I think the Lions probably wins this by about six-ish, I think. Yeah, like you said, this is going to be an absolute barn burner, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, the Lions are just going to be the more talented team, and it's going to show.
Totally agree. I also believe the Lions are going to win this one, but again, watch out for the Commanders. The Commanders could pull off the upset. I just don't think it's very likely. The next game on Sunday is a game I think is going to be super close, but Vegas doesn't seem to believe at all. Eagles and Rams. Eagles are a 6.5-point favorite hosting the Rams. I'm going to be honest. I think the Rams could pull off this upset. And I know I have Philly going all the way. Like, I know I predicted this before the playoffs started that this matchup would happen. I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't be shocked if the Rams went into Philadelphia and pulled off the upset. Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I think the Rams and Eagles are two teams that I just have no idea what to think about them anymore. I would not be surprised if the Rams win this by 6. I'd not be surprised if the Eagles win this by 20. It just depends on what form of each team we get. I think if the Rams show up how they showed up last week and the Eagles show up how their offense showed up last week, then yeah, the Rams probably got this one. But I think just overall, again, the Eagles are just probably the more talented team. You wonder if all that bickering we had in the regular season is going to end up coming back to bite them in the playoffs. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the Eagles here.
One thing to note, these two teams did match up in the regular season. That was the game that Saquon had 255 or 260 yards. He had a crazy stat line. and the Eagles won comfortably. I think they won by 17 or 18. So these two teams have played each other within the last few months. So we kind of have an idea, but I don't think that was the same Rams team, and I don't think that's the same Eagles team that we're going to get. I, as much as I want to pick the Rams, I still think the Eagles are going to win. I think it's going to be a field goal game. It could be a last second Jake Elliott walking it off, but I think this is going to be one of the more fun games we have all week if the Rams are able to stop Saquon, because then you're really putting a lot of pressure on Hurts to make some throws. And not saying Hurts is a bad quarterback when it comes to throwing, but I don't know. There's a lot of bad juju right now with Philly, and although I did pick them to go to the Super Bowl, I think the team chemistry could also be the reason that they don't make it to the Super Bowl. But yeah,
I feel like the Rams' defense's strengths are more in pass rush, though.
right.
I wonder. I don't think they're really great at stopping the run, and Saquon's going to win Offensive Player of the Year.
Right.
And like we've said, Jalen Hurts is a running quarterback, so we'll see. But I think the stars are aligning for the Eagles here.
I'm curious to see how many passing attempts the Eagles are going to have with Hurts. I think if they're able to keep his passing attempts under 27, 26, I think Philly's going to win this one pretty comfortably. But if those passing attempts get over 30, maybe 35, which he hasn't really been doing all season, he took a step back in a lot of his passing numbers when it comes to yardage. If they're going to rely on him to make some critical throws, I think the Rams could have this. But again, only time will tell, and that should be one of the probably the second most entertaining game, but obviously on to the final game of the slate for this weekend. The game that everyone is talking about, probably the best matchup we're going to get in the playoffs against the MVP or the MVP runner-up, however you want to look at it, because one guy's going to win it, one guy's going to finish second. I'm, of course, referring to the Buffalo Bills hosting the Baltimore Ravens. This one is at 5:30 on Sunday in the primetime slot. I'm super excited for this game. It being in Buffalo, I think, helps the Bills out a lot. I think the stat I saw on Twitter, or X, whatever people call it, it's going to be the coldest game Lamar's ever played in the pros. It's going to be 8 degrees, and it's going to feel like -4. So I'm curious to see. I know Baltimore is really good at running the ball, and running the ball always translates in playing cold weather. I'm super curious to see how Buffalo ends up playing in this game. I think Baltimore's got the better defense as of now. I think Baltimore's kind of rolling on offense more. They obviously have more weapons. I think the huge point, though, is whether or not Zay Flowers ends up playing. I know he missed practice again today, which I think is a pretty big loss for Baltimore if he's not able to go. But yeah, I want to just rip the Band-Aid right off. Who do you got in this game? Do you have the Buffalo Bills moving on, or do you have the Baltimore Ravens?
I think I had the Bills in my bracket, but you know what? We're here to live dangerous. I got the Ravens here.
All right.
I think Lamar finally does it. I think he finally gets a win in the playoffs against a team that's not like a bottom seed.
Right.
I think Derrick Henry is the final missing piece of the puzzle. There's not really been a superstar running back for the Ravens to help Lamar out in the running game like Derrick Henry, and I think it's just it finally is clicking in a way that we have not seen, and I think it's going to show.
Another thing with this game, these two teams did match up in the regular season. They did. I think Baltimore ended up rolling them. I don't even think that the game was close.
It was 35 to 3 or something.
It was something bad. I also do think that game was back in September. I don't put a whole lot of stock into that at this point in the season. That's feels like ages ago. I think that was week 4. So I think Buffalo's a different team as of now. I had Buffalo in my bracket. I think I'm still going to pick Buffalo. I just think Josh Allen is going to be able to make plays for Buffalo. I still think Baltimore's got some weaknesses on defense that Buffalo can exploit. I think it's going to come down to whether or not Lamar can play well in the cold. Not saying that he can't, but Josh is used to it at this point, playing in Buffalo the last 7 or 8 years. I think the Bills win this one. Again, I think this can be a field goal game. Vegas seems to think that Baltimore is the slight favorite at -1. So it's basically a pick 'em in a lot of people's eyes. I think the Bills pull this one out 24-21, and I think it's going to be a super, super entertaining game. Another kind of talking point on this game that I really want to touch on before we kind of wrap up this episode is where do you think this game is going to hurt Lamar more if he loses this playoff game, or do you think it's going to hurt Josh more if he loses this playoff game? Who has more to lose from this playoff game?
I think Lamar. If Lamar loses this game, then I don't think the monkey will ever be able to be shaken off.
Mm-hmm.
I think he will forever be labeled a playoff choker. It might already be too late, but yeah, I think if he loses this game, I think there's no shaking it. This is the year. It kind of has to happen, and if it doesn't, then I think he's gonna be one of those guys that finishes with a lot of MVPs and no ring to show for it.
I'm going to make a comp. Stylistically, they're two polar opposites. Okay? So just bear with me for a second. Is Lamar the Peyton Manning of our generation? Or of this generation, I should say. What I mean by that is Peyton Manning always had the regular season numbers. Peyton Manning would win MVPs. Like, no one would argue his regular season success. But Peyton didn't play well in the playoffs at all. I know he's got 2 Super Bowls, but that last Super Bowl in Denver, let's be honest, he was just on the team. He was not the bus driver, he was the bus rider on that team, on that 2016 Denver team. I do think it's going to be super tough for Lamar. I don't want to say Josh is playing with house money because at the beginning of the season, not a whole lot of people believed in the Bills after all the offseason losses they had with Stephon Diggs and countless pieces on defense. I do also agree with you, though. I think Lamar has the most to lose. You don't know how many more prime Derrick Henry years you're going to get. It's already his 9th season in the league. I looked it up earlier, but Adrian Peterson, his last great year was year 9 in the league. You don't know how much longer Derrick's really going to be at that best running back in the league conversation anymore. I think the stars have aligned for Baltimore to win this game. So I think if it ultimately results in Lamar having a bad game and they lose, with Lamar already having some regular season MVPs, I think Lamar is going to get absolutely tore apart by the media. Now, saying that on the flip side, if Josh ends up having a bad game too, I think he should get his share of flack. I just think Josh has done more with less, whereas Lamar has the talent around him. And if Lamar doesn't show up at this point, it's kind of an if not when, like if it is it ever going to happen for Lamar to make a serious Super Bowl run. So yeah, I would have to say Lamar has the most to lose when it comes to him and Josh. But yeah, kind of wrapping up this episode. Braden, do you have anything else you really want to hammer on or talk about?
No, I think I said all I wanted to say.
Actually, there was one more thing I wanted to bring up in this episode because it happened last Friday, right after we recorded the wild card preview. NFL All Pro list came out. It's kind of a huge deal for some of these players for contract incentives and just like where like the media and their peers kind of view them in the NFL. Like, so I think it's super important to talk about. First team All Pro, not a whole lot of surprise. I guess the biggest surprise for first team All Pro was Lamar was named the first team All Pro quarterback. It felt like this entire year that Josh was going to be first team All Pro, and the MVP odds have actually shifted pretty dramatically in favor of Lamar. Lamar went from a huge underdog before to now Lamar I think is a -2 or 300 favorite. And I don't think there's ever been a quarterback to win MVP while being second team All Pro. Something to note. Maybe it's just kind of a preview of Lamar going to win it. But were there any names that really stood out to you of players that should have made it, that didn't, or players that made it that didn't deserve to make it for first team?
No, I mean, looking at it, it looks pretty chalk. Like I was saying, I'd say Lamar probably had the better statistical season, so
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that he ended up getting the first team nod. Uh, I guess the only one that I'm not really like entirely sure on is Quinn Miners. Just I guess I haven't really been watching much of Denver or the offensive
Right,
line to really be like, oh yeah, definitely this guy should.
right.
But I know Chris Lindstrom's one of the best guards in football,
He is.
so seeing him be on the second team is interesting, but again, people are getting paid a hell of a lot more than I am to analyze this stuff. I'm sure some stat somewhere, or just more like if I were to sit down and break down all 22 footage, maybe it'd be like, oh yeah, obviously he's been
Right. If
one of the
this
best players on their team. He should
if
be.
this was our full time job, yeah, I'd be in the lab
Yeah.
grinding first or the all 22, figure out offensive guard rankings. But as just two guys, and then with Brock, obviously, that just kind of see it from a far view and just give our honest analysis of this. Um, yeah, that one I was kind of like taken back by too, but maybe he's had a better season than I would have given him credit for. But were there any other ones?
No, not really. I mean, yeah, Jamar Chase, Justice Jefferson, Amon St. Brown on first team. That's good. I mean, yeah, maybe that's just like a hey, Denver's had a really good year. They beat
Right,
a lot of odds, but like we're not gonna throw Bo Nix in the All Pro first
right,
team.
obviously.
So I mean, Quinn Miners is still really good. I don't want to seem like I'm trashing Quinn Miners of the Broncos.
Mhm.
I just I don't know. I guess I just didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, the one that kind of took me back. I guess I have two talking points. Shout out Brock Bowers for first team All Pro tight end. Had an unbelievable rookie season. I don't think anyone could take that away from him. But him earning first team All Pro odds is it's just really impressive for a rookie straight out of that only played 3 years in college. I think that's shout out to Brock Bowers for that one. Then the other one I wanted to bring up was University of Iowa's own Tristan Wirfs becoming the first player ever to be first team All Pro at right tackle and then first team All Pro at left tackle. I think that's I don't think people understand that are non like that didn't actually play football or understand football to that extent. Moving from the right side to the left side and vice versa is a huge change. So shout out to him for making that switch. I believe last year or 2 years ago. I just think that's super impressive. Um, yeah, another player that I think you could have made an argument for first team. I know this can sound biased. I think Trent McDuffie should have found a way onto that first team All Pro team. I think you could have switched him out for a guy like Marlon Humphrey, who I'm not in the all 22 grinding NFL cornerback footage. Like I just that's just not what I do. I don't have enough time in the day for that. But feel like McDuffie has played like a top 3 corner this year, which is what the All Pro list says. I don't think he's been better than Surtain, who's been in the running for Defense Player of the Year, and I don't think he's better than Stingley. I think you can make an argument though that he should be in that spot over a guy like Marlon Humphrey. But yeah, a lot of these players had great seasons. Um, but yeah, kind of a big talking point for fans. It ultimately, I think, affects players' contracts too. Maybe it's just Pro Bowl nods now that I say that, but this
I don't know.
I know it's one of the two. Like if you make a Pro Bowl and All Pro, you get a bump in your contract. Maybe it's both. I don't know. I'm not a contract wizard either. But yeah, a lot of these guys will be making a lot more money because of these All Pros selections. So shout out to them. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up this episode of the Sports Nerds. We kind of discussed the divisional round of the playoffs, kind of where we see um, the Cowboys potentially landing their head coach, who we list out a few candidates for that. But yeah, for Braden Banking, I'm Dawson Livingston, signing off of the Sports Nerds.